If you enjoy this content, please take a moment to rate and review it. Your feedback will greatly impact our ability to reach more people. Thank you. What's up, man? How's it going?
Going well. I'm in Chicago. It's a beautiful day here. I was ready for it to be cold, and it's wonderful, 60 and sunny. So,
That's awesome.
Mood. Yeah.
Beautiful day here in Nashville as well. So seems like we've got nice weather in the central time zone, sort of middle America. Yeah. That's nice. And you were there for a board meeting?
Yeah, board up here named Huku, and they're doing pretty well, growing quickly. We have growth problems, but I'll take growth problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's good.
Hiring, that's good. Whatever, trying to keep up with the demands on the performance side on the servers. So
awesome. Okay. Well, look, we have a big show to cover, and wish you were in the office, but let's do the best we can here remotely, and let's dig in. Starting with the economy, there was a repricing, if you will, of GDP from Q4. Originally, we thought it was a 0.7% growth, and now it's been revised down to 0.5%. So rearview mirror, but still resetting expectations about how well we were doing relative to how well we will do for the rest of this year.
That's right. And if you go down a little bit, there's a pretty good chart about economic growth quarter to quarter. The fourth quarter was pretty bad after two really good quarters. It feels like now the war is going to make Q2 challenging. So yeah, the economy is maybe holding on, but barely holding on.
Barely. And more on the private credit side. So last week we talked about how all the big banks were invested in private credit, sort of through the fund managers. Now we're finding out the pensions are also in the private credit space in a pretty significant way. I don't think that's hugely surprising to you and I, because the pensions are limited partners and they have a pretty diverse book, but it seems like we've got a drumbeat now of sort of signaling people to pay attention to this private credit situation, because it's layered throughout the capital ecosystem.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's a different thing when you go from a large family office or an institutional investor, hedge fund, or someone that's trying to make returns and they are accredited or even qualified. But then you go to a state pension fund. Of course, they are certainly allowed to invest in these things, but they're taking care of people's retirement, and I think they are trying to reach for returns to catch up to sort of underfunding, and that causes people to maybe not price the risk because they're trying to grab returns.
Yeah, and this article seems to be focusing on the fact that the regulators are not going to be able to do much about this one, right? So do you think that there's a bit of a signal like, hey, get ready for the next bailout? This thing is entrenched in all the systems that we ask the American public to trust. It's in the big banks, it's in the pensions, and right now, given economic confidence, we probably can't allow this fallout to just happen. So, you might want to get ready for some more money printing.
That's definitely the Wall Street Journal's point of view. Every week they're putting out stories about different aspects of this, and I think it's because it's going to be a problem at some point. But yes, yeah. Hopefully it will be controlled. I think that's the best case scenario. Is it's not a great returning asset, but there's no big problem that's contagious across the whole economy and have to be bailed out.
Yeah. Okay. So focusing on the job market for a second, and not so much talking exclusively about job loss and layoffs, but actually talking about demographics and immigration. So this labor force participation rate chart here, covering from 2001 to 2025, really like kind of almost up until right this moment, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics via Fred, it shows a pretty significant decline in labor force participation from north of 67% in 2000 and 2001 down to now, below 62%. And a lot of this, I guess, is because we have such a huge population that is aging out of out of the workforce and retiring, and then layer on top of that probably incremental and more of a modern thing, but Trump's immigration crackdown that's pushing a fraction of the labor force out as well. And so that's an interesting storyline we haven't talked much about at all. We talk a lot about, obviously, the strain that the healthcare ecosystem is going to feel as the silver tsunami, continues to reach its peak. But we haven't necessarily talked a lot about how labor force participation is also declining. And at this time, at the intersection of job losses, automation via AI. And so it really complicates the picture quite a bit, don't you think?
There's no question. I mean, we are losing people from the workforce, and that's a drag. It's a decline on GDP. All other things equal, we have, and the story talks about it a little bit, we've had pretty good productivity growth, and so that has sort of balanced the two. So we're getting, as we talked about 2 stories ago, the economy is still slightly positive. So that can make up for it, but it is challenging, I think. With if you have 60%, I mean, there's 40% of the population that's not contributing. That's hard to make up for. But we will have productivity gains with the technology advances we're having. So that's sort of the pro and con.
Yeah, agree. Okay, and then this story about the new jobs being created by AI. This is something I know about. I know several people working in this new sort of AI first economy. But there are new jobs that are being created by the need to work with artificial intelligence. On the frontier side, there's training and testing and finding errors. On the corporate side, there's change management. There's, making harnesses compliant. There's building out workflows. There's tuning. There are these new skills that have really developed into being so important that they're worth hiring specifically for, and even training people to do these new jobs. So that's pretty cool. It says here AI created 640,000 jobs between 2023 and 2025 in the U.S., according to an analysis by LinkedIn of job posting data, including new white collar positions such as head of AI and AI engineer. So that is some bright spot there, and I wonder how many openings there are in this new AI job economy, because as you and I know, we talk to people all the time. At best, people are sort of chatting with these tools. They're not really digging into prompt and token efficiency and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's good that we talk about this, and I think I'm happy that the Wall Street Journal is covering it and LinkedIn's doing reports. To me, there's no question that AI will create a lot of jobs, more jobs, I think, than it destroys in a 10-year view, in a long time horizon. The question really is, will the job losses come first? I think yes. But watching this is where, that's what kind of where the market's going. And if people are concerned, these are the skills that are really going to be in demand. And I think in high demand. I think they don't have the stats in the article, but I think there are a lot more openings than there are qualified applicants right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. All right, moving into the VC breakdown. Yuzu Health raises $35 million in Series A funding. This is a New York City-based provider of a third-party administrator service, or TPA, that serves the infrastructure behind health insurance plans. They raised $35 million in this funding. Notably, the round was led by General Catalyst and Chemistry, with participation from Anthropic's Anthology Fund and Bain. Heavy hitters around this company here. The managing director of General Catalyst, Alex Tran, is going to join the board of directors. Total amount of money raised here is $40 million. So this 35 was sitting on top of only 5. That's a huge round for this company, Yuzu Health.
Yeah, General Catalyst is going to be really powerful. I mean, having them lead the deal when they also own the health system and all the other assets they have, that catches my attention. TPAs have been around forever, but they're not super efficient. Like, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to make that service of, sort of allowing your employer to pay all the costs, but they need to have the network contracts. They need to have someone calculate everything, do all the claims. There's a lot of opportunity to really improve that service. And so I don't know much about Yazoo, but I think it could be a really interesting space.
Yep. Agree. Okay, Rock Health, as always, came out with their quarterly digital health funding review for Q1 of 2026. They have basically highlighted two main things. One is that capital is continuing to concentrate, and that just tracks with the rest of the industry. So that doesn't surprise me at all. 75% of the capital going to 30 funds. And then I guess the second bit is that these AI frontier companies are really getting engaged in the digital health space. They're not just doing, for example, OpenAI is not only doing ChatGPT Health, but they're investing in companies and they're doing data partnerships and they're finding ways to strategically go to market in specific verticals, which I think is super smart because we're a $4 trillion industry, right? I mean, it's so complicated that there are many, many opportunities to take OpenAI's capability, influence, market power, and of course, high quality frontier models and attack very specific market opportunities, but not through the mothership, but through smaller companies. So those are the two things that I sort of got through this read. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I agree. I think there was a significant uptick in funding. It is concentrated, but there was some growth in the funding. That chart is just for the one quarter compared to full years. And so, yeah, we had a pretty good quarter. And I agree. I think that just like mobile came out and was sort of the interface that people were trying to get lock in and build an ecosystem, certainly the App Store and Facebook were pretty successful in the mobile world. And I think that's what these frontier models are trying to do. They're launching their own health initiatives, but they're also making investments and trying to get valuable health services, health products on their platform in some preferred ways to try to get users. It's over 40% of users are chatting with their LO, their favorite LM, about their own healthcare. And I agree that they're not going to be able to do everything on their own. They need experts in different niches, and so they're actively, and all of them are doing that. So it's pretty interesting.
Very cool. And then Anthropic acquires a stealth AI company called Coefficient Bio in a $400 million deal. Now, of course, they're stealth, right? So we don't really know what this company does, but we do know that they are in the biotech space, presumably doing something around drug discovery. But this space is just really, really heating up. Last week, we talked about Lilly's deal, and here we have Anthropic going all in on presumably what's going to now be a business unit for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the most promising early uses of AI in healthcare, I think, along with ambient coding and other things. But being able to create, plausible new drugs, new drug pathways, new drug ways to approach a situation of disease, and then run sort of the first version of clinical trials in silico, like in the AI models, they're running these scenarios so they can be very targeted about what they actually go through the full trials process. I think that really can make the whole process much more efficient and get better products, more effective drugs out there for us. So it'd be great. I agree. We don't know much about it, but it's a really promising space.
Agree. Okay. And here from Wall Street Journal, WSJ Pro, the private equity segment, more news about California. The California AG urges walling off medical practices from private equity. I understand. We've been talking about this for quite some time, and we've covered some really terrible stories that have actually happened in California, where private equity, I think we can just call them bad actors, result in the loss of care in certain communities. And then, whether it's California or Massachusetts, the state ends up having to cover the bill, right? Find a way to provide care for those communities when the properties are basically mismanaged, sucked dry of any value that they might have, and then the P&Ls go upside down. Having said that, I think in Q1 of 2026, now Q2 of 2026, time's going fast, that's not how I read this story. I read this story as this is yet another California political initiative that has the unintended consequence of driving capital out of the state. Now we're no longer in the moment where we're talking about private equity as bad actors. That was, I don't know, maybe it was a year ago, under Biden administration and Lena Khan.
Yes.
We're in a different era now. We're in Trump administration era. And, Now what you're talking about is capital flight, out of these cities and states where the politicians have decided that wealth taxes or punitive regulations are a good idea to balance out what has been maybe not the best implementation of capitalism. And look, I get the need to do something, but you also have to look at the outsized contribution to the tax base that these capital providers represent, and what's going to happen when they take flight, because they're going to. So for me, I'm worried about California at this point. I'm worried about the number of companies that are looking at leaving. I know that San Francisco is having a revival. I think that's amazing, because they've produced some of the most valuable companies over the last 25, 30 years in America. That's awesome. But California is a great state, and I'm worried about the tax base. Honestly, that's my biggest worry at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that California is doing its best to chase anyone that has wealth or pays taxes or manages money out of the state, which is foolish, but what they're doing. This AG is saying that private equity is shown to decrease the quality of care after they invest. And I'm sure he has facts to say about that, but I think there'll be another decrease in the quality of care because there isn't another pool of capital that's going to step in and support these health systems. It's not like there's an alternative. So they're just going to not have as much access, which also is going to decrease the quality of care. So I don't think it was a well-balanced assessment, but they are moving on it.
Well, I think the alternative is the state, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we had that in Tennessee called TennCare. It didn't work that well. I mean, it's hard for a state to manage healthcare.
Yeah. So I don't know. I agree with you. I think saying this entire set of asset managers cannot participate in medical practices. Exactly, Vic. It's like, okay, if they don't, who's going to?
Right.
Like are any public companies going to do that? Like, why would they? The return profile is terrible. Public market shareholders are not going to say, yeah, please go buy that medical practice.
Right.
And
if they do buy it, they're going to behave pretty similar, I think, to how private equity would interact with it.
Well, they have to. They have to act in shareholders' interests. So,
Right.
So to your point, there's only two options. There's public equity or private equity, right?
Right.
Those are only two buckets of capital that can actually support these practices, right? I mean, and we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the health system performances. There's a pretty clear trend in the United States that if you want to perform well at the margins, you need scale. Like, you can't be a onesie twosie small P&L and make it. You need scale, so you have group buying power, so you have operational efficiencies that it can be centralized and deployed across a large network. That's what you need in order to make this business work. Cutting out private equity is just going to cut out the ability for that scale to be present in California. So
yeah, no question. I mean, if they wanted to prevent distributions, if there's new debt put on the business or something like that, I mean, there are tactics that I think are maybe questionable or pretty clearly not good for the users of the health system. But that's not what they're doing. They're just saying, like, private equity is not welcome in California.
Yeah, it's pretty strong blanket statement. CMS finalizes higher Medicare Advantage rates for 2027 and a gift to insurers. I like that. Healthcare. This is Healthcare Dive,
yeah.
and a gift to insurers. It kind of is a gift, right? Because they were starting with a 0.09% proposal for the rate hike, and now they've moved to 2.48%. I wonder how much this has to do with their assessment that the insurers have adjusted their behavior in a way that is in accordance with their goals, right, with CMS's goals. And so they said, okay, like I wonder how much of it was a gift versus a reward for so much of the shifts and the changes that we've seen in the MA space across the insurers.
Yeah, no question. I think there's a lot of lobbying and a lot of deal making by the Kennedy/Trump HHS administration. So we don't see all of that behind the scenes. I think this was a pretty classic come out and show the strength at, we're not going to give you a rate of increase at all, basically, like 0.09% increase is well below inflation. And then they had, a variety of discussions over the last 3 months, and now they've come out with a revision basically to inflation. I think that I agree. There's probably other things that were given in return for this. And I wouldn't say it's a gift. I mean, I think it's more of a sustainable rate, but
100%. And I'm really glad that you pointed out 2.48 is basically core CPI, right? I mean, that's basically inflation.
Yeah, it might be a touch below it, but it's pretty much at inflation.
Yeah, basically at inflation. So maybe inflation plus 0.09 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, New York Times, federal agency unveils 3 potential osteoarthritis treatments. With funding from ARPA-H, 3 teams of researchers have regrown bone and cartilage, even entire knees in animal studies. Human trials are not far off.
Yeah, this is incredible. I mean, ARPA-H has so much promise, but we hadn't really seen much come out of it. A bunch of money went in, and it's great to see the beginnings of it's still science. I mean, it's in animal studies, but
sure,
we have a lot of orthopedic needs, and so anything similar to this would be incredible. And what ARPA-H should be doing is sort of advancing that early stage so that it gets to a point where the markets can then commercialize it.
Look, I love the timing on this. I mean, my knees are okay at the moment, but I had to do a lot of strength work to make them okay. A lot of strengthening around all the small muscles around the quad and whatnot. Yeah. And I'm pretty terrified about osteoarthritis, to be honest with you. I mean, full knee replacements and things like that are pretty scary. And so the idea that we can regrow bone and cartilage and even an entire knee, I never really thought about that. So that's amazing. And it feels like the velocity that we're experiencing in all these other aspects of science is now starting to come to healthcare in some really beneficial ways. So I think the timing for you and I, kind of in our early 50s is pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, staying in shape and keeping your weight down, it really helps knees and hips as you age.
Yep. All right, moving on to providers. Advocate Health improves to 4% operating margin, $4.6 billion bottom line across 2025. So this is kind of what I was referring to earlier, right? I mean, Advocate Health, was formerly Advocate Aurora and Atrium Health, and merged a couple of years back. And now they are the 3rd largest nonprofit health system. And now I think when you look across the top nonprofits, it's Common Spirit, it's Ascension, and Advocate Health, they're all doing quite well, right? They've kind of figured out the issues over the last 2-3 years. They're now starting to drop, real meaningful EBITDA through the bottom line. They've got their operating margins in a pretty solid place. And I think a lot of that has to do with the scale that they have, right? The scale and the quality of the facilities and the quality of the markets that they've put themselves in, right? And I happen to know the folks at Advocate. Atrium Health was a LP in Novo Fund 1, and some of that really innovative stuff that they're doing from a home health perspective is super impressive. So when you have that scale, you can start to kind of take the best practices from one health system and another health system, combine them, and create these net new service lines that neither really had before. That's another benefit of the scale that comes from the M&As. And so I hate to sort of harken back to the private equity bit, but there's not going to be that many of these nonprofits, right? They're going to pick and choose their markets. They're going to optimize for revenue, as we're seeing at least these top 3 do. And where is that going to leave, many of these smaller players? I just think it's a lot of short-sightedness in the political games that are being played.
No question. So their revenue increased by 12%, while inpatient number of patients in beds rose at 4%, 4.5%. So they definitely are getting other sources of revenue in the ambulatory or home health that are net new business lines for them, or at least growing significantly more than the existing systems, which is great.
All right, this was a hard story to read, but I was glad that you found it. This is from Fierce Healthcare. Nurses' job satisfaction stumbles after post-pandemic gains, the survey shows. Job satisfaction among nearly 2,100 nurses dropped from 55% to 47%. It's the first time since 2022, when there was a 28% low kind of coming out of COVID, that the measurement has not improved from the prior year. So, we've been seeing the rumblings, we've been seeing the strikes, we've been hearing about the burnout, we've been hearing about the moral injury. But to see an 8% drop year over year in job satisfaction is really, really disturbing at a time when we're going to need nurses so badly to stretch out our ability to deliver care. Hard news, hard pill to swallow. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. And we need our nurses, and they have a really hard job. We need to take care of them. The striking thing for me is that a little bit further down, 43% of nurses said they're likely to leave bedside the next year. And that really hit with me. Like, we can't lose 40% of our nurses. I mean, even 10%, we can't lose any nurses. The other thing I'll say is that I've been watching the Pit, on which of course is a fictional show, but they have been doing a really good job sort of illustrating through storytelling what happens in the EDs. And there's multiple times when my wife will turn to me and say that can't really happen. Like, so, a nurse gets attacked, or and it does happen.
It does
every
happen.
day. Every day it happens. And so we need to be telling these stories. I think it's great that they're telling the stories on HBO. And I don't know what the solution is, but we have to find a way to protect the nurses and then boost them up, because we need them.
I watched season 1, and I haven't been able to get myself to watch season 2 for that exact reason, because obviously
season 2 is worse, or harder.
I figured, right? I mean, like if that was the floor, right? Right. Like, I figured they were coming with a harder season, and I was like, I don't, the world's hard enough. I don't know that I can do that.
Well, you're fully educated on what's going on. I think it's good that people including my wife, they just don't understand how difficult it is to be working in this environment.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Quasi provider Hims and Hers says limited data was stolen in a social engineering hack. The telehealth provider said hackers gained access to a third-party customer service platform, but medical records remain secure. So I'm assuming this is something like their CRM, where they manage, customer tickets and things like that. And I could see how they would have their PHI segmented from that type of system. But when we talk about social engineering attacks and we think about providers, we think about health systems. We don't typically think about these D2C platforms, but they have a ton of PHI, don't they, Vic?
They do. And with these, I think it's really great that patients can collect their own data and then use it on online formats like this. But it's only great if then Hims and Hers protects the data just like an inpatient facility would protect it. And I think the unfortunate reality is that the attackers are getting better and better every day and using AI and other tools. And it's hard for operating businesses to keep up. I mean, the attackers only have to be right one time, and the defenders have to be right. You got to be right every day, all day, and never miss. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, just something to keep an eye on, because, I know so many people use these platforms, and obviously we have many data breaches that happen on the financial side. There was just another one that happened, and I got the notice in the mail, and I'm kind of numb to those, right? That's a little bit different from these D2C healthcare companies, where typically just some pretty sensitive things there, right? So this is going to be something we need to really carefully watch. Okay, moving into pharma, Gilead to buy cancer biotech Tubulis for more than $3 billion. They're based in Munich, and they specialize in next generation chemotherapies. So Gilead making a big purchase here.
Yeah, the chemotherapy and CAR T, they do some CAR T as well. is really getting a lot of attention. It has a lot of promise, as we've talked about before. There's some challenges too, but I think any kind of cancer treatments, I'm excited to get. Gilead will just have a much bigger mandate to be able to bring it globally.
Agree. That's great. Here's a company I never heard of before, but it's a big acquisition. Neurocrine is buying Soleno, which is a company in the endocrinology space, and they're nabbing the drug company for a $2.9 billion deal. So that's a pretty big deal. These are both publicly traded companies, and so, kind of a merger of sorts, if you will. Say a little bit about this. This is a rare genetic disorder that they're solving here?
Yeah. So they have the only treatment for what's called Prader-Willi syndrome, which I didn't know before this story, but it's called a rare disease. It affects about 10,000 people in the U.S., so it's rare as a percentage, but there's still a decent number of people that are affected. And so they got acquired. I think that there's, unfortunately, there's a lot of people globally with this. I mean, not compared to cancer, but it's, it also has better reimbursement because rare disease has a different reimbursement structure.
Yeah. All right. And then Novo is launching a higher dose Wegovy weight loss shot in the United States. It was approved by the FDA 3 weeks ago under an accelerated approval process. So more GLP-1s for everyone.
Yeah. I don't really get why you need a 3x dose. I guess it's more optionality.
Maybe it just means less shots, right?
Yeah, you can do it once a week, I think. I'm a little concerned that there's going to be more side effects with that kind of bolus coming in one day, but I don't know.
Yes. And then Eli Lilly is launching an oral GLP-1 drug across the U.S. through Lilly Direct, telehealth providers. And so more proof that Lilly Direct is not just a pilot. This is a dedicated strategy that Eli Lilly is doing. So last week we talked about the pills. Now we know that they're going to be launching those direct to consumer through the Lilly Direct platform with their network of telehealth providers.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing was the cost. I mean, they're saying as little as $25 a month, which is significantly lower than I had seen.
Okay, to Health and Us, we haven't had a whole lot of these stories lately, but I think this is a really cool one, especially as we transition into some stories on the AI front. One of those stories where someone is sharing their own tests that they're doing with AI. This person uploaded their blood work to AI and then gives a rundown on the different results that they got, and also asked the question of, whether or not it's oversharing to share your blood work with AI because, is this thing held to the same rigorous standards that EHRs are, health systems are, health coaches are, et cetera, et cetera. So really interesting because I think a lot of people have already done this,
Right.
And maybe they are doing it under certain assumptions. But I thought this was cool in a couple of ways. One, it was cool to sort of see this journalist's perspective on which application did the best job in which scenarios. That's always fun to learn. But also just the question of, am I oversharing and am I protected when I upload my blood work to these platforms?
Yeah, that's right. And I think Florida does a good job sort of using her own experience and then telling both sides of it. So she brought in a doctor from UC San Francisco to sort of give her, the medical side of it. He, of course, said that he does not recommend anyone upload to any AIs. But then she went ahead and did it. And she, as we have all seen, you get some pretty useful insights. But you're right, there's not, the guardrails are not the same as a health system or a doctor. Some of the labs have elected to create HIPAA compliant kind of sandboxes or products, but not everyone. And it's not always clear who is and who isn't. So yeah, it was a good story. And there's different, she sort of gives a winner, it's talked about cardiovascular disease and then supplements and sort of a general kind of feeling like maybe they have a sore throat. So we've got three pretty diverse, different prompts used in her blood work.
Yeah, and on the cardiovascular disease one, which I know is important to you with your end heart disease initiative that you're launching, Perplexity was the winner.
Yeah, which I was surprised about. I haven't really thought about Perplexity in a minute, but maybe I need to circle back to them.
Yeah, I like Perplexity. I still kind of use Perplexity anytime my mental model for AI use is a research project.
Yeah.
Because I just think they do the best job of sitting on top across the models, optimizing your query from a token perspective with the best model for the use case. And then I think they also do a great job on presentation. It's not just like a bunch of paragraphs, kind of a mini essay.
Yeah.
They can put graphs in there. That their listing of sources and their links to sources is really good. So I think Perplexity is still a really strong platform out there, and also useful for research cases.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move into all things AI. Let's start with Cloudflare targeting 2029 for full post-quantum security. Now, of course, quantum is not exactly AI. However, I think it's pretty clear that AI is accelerating quantum, right? Like before AI came on the scene, like quantum was kind of like, oh, look at this cool supercomputer that barely works,
Right.
And now everyone's talking about Q-Day in 2029, and I think clearly AI is being used to accelerate quantum technology development. And Bitcoiners are talking about whether or not Bitcoin is going to be quantum proof. And even if they get it to be quantum proof, there may be a whole bunch of abandoned wallets that are not quantum proof and could be eligible for serious theft, which could, compromise the entire network if a significant percentage of it is stolen. But Cloudflare being one of the biggest, I don't know what you would even call them, but proxies for the internet, like much of the internet sits behind Cloudflare. They are targeting 2029 for full post-quantum security, which is great. It's great to see Cloudflare thinking, hey, we got to protect all these websites that sort of, sit behind our infrastructure, and quantum proofing is going to be something we're going to be talking more and more and more and more about.
Yeah, no question. I mean, 2 different papers came out last week. We didn't cover them, but just different approaches to solving this quantum cryptography, quantum computer, which probably the most profitable use case would be breaking cryptography. And Oratomic, I think is how maybe you say it, they were able to show that you could do it with only 10,000 qubits, which is really low. I mean, I thought it was like 1 million. People were saying 700,000, and getting to 10,000. I mean, there are some labs that are at like 5,000 now, and so it's not much closer. I just think it's why Cloudflare is accelerating, which I agree is great. They'll lead, and then other people can sort of learn from Cloudflare and add to it. But Bitcoin has a lot of work to do on their side. Bitcoin can't make a decision very easily. That's the problem with Bitcoin.
Yes. Bitcoin hasn't decided whether or not it thinks it's a serious threat.
Right.
So,
right. Exactly.
I think that's actually
There's no one at Bitcoin corporate. There is no Bitcoin corporate. That's the beauty of it, but it also, for situations like this, it makes it really difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that before Cloudflare put out this 2029 target, Ethereum put out a 2029 target for post quantum security to be PQ compliant. So I think
Ethereum is really on top of everything over the last 6 months. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, for sure. All right, 2 OpenAI stories, 2 Anthropic stories. The first OpenAI story, the industrial policy for the intelligence age. This is a policy document from OpenAI that is basically their thoughts on where I'm presuming the United States' policy in the era of AI should land. And of course, ideas to keep people first is kind of the byline here. But I think the point of this is like a public lobbying effort, right? I mean, they're trying to say, hey, we understand you guys are behind on this. We've been thinking about this deeply from the beginning, and here's what we think the policy roadmap should look like. Is that basically it, Vic?
That's what they're saying, and they give a lot of detail. I think it is targeted at the U.S., but also Europe. They don't limit it to the U.S. I think it is. Maybe I'll try to be kind. There's a lot of good stuff in here. I mean, it is useful information, but I do not think, at least I don't trust OpenAI to sort of take care of me in the next 20 years. I don't see how that's an equation that really works, but that's what they're saying.
I want to just say some of the things that are mentioned here without much discussion, but I do want to run through them
Okay.
because, they take some of the things that have been bandied about and maybe the general public considers to be science fiction, and it's like maybe not, right? So,
I mean, we're going to talk
um,
in the next couple stories about it's coming faster than anyone thinks.
yes, a public wealth fund. Create a public wealth fund that provides every citizen, including those not invested in financial markets, with a stake in AI-driven economic growth. So that right there tells you, like, if you didn't think AI was going to consume an outsized percentage of the economy, why would you propose something like that, right?
Right.
Efficiency dividends. Convert efficiency gains into AI from AI into durable improvements in workers' benefits when routine workload declines and operating costs fall. Adaptive safety nets that work for everyone. Make sure the existing safety net works reliably, quickly, and at scale, because if the transition to superintelligence is going to benefit everyone, the systems designed to provide economic and health security need to deliver without delay or gaps. And it just kind of goes on and on. Portable benefits, pathways into human-centered work. But I mean, clearly the undertone here is this is going to be a huge societal shift. Huge.
Yeah, no question. And a lot of this is hard to argue with on one level. Like, okay, let's share the benefits across the whole economy. I think everyone would be for that.
Right.
How is a whole different question. I mean, like, how are we going to tax something in order to then have money to share? And those details are just sort of left silent. But that's the real meat. Like, if it was this easy, just like, share for everyone, I think politicians would actually get something done. It's harder than that.
Okay. Next story is about cities and states taking aim at data centers. And I highlight this because OpenAI is, a big data center builder. But we have bans being raised on new data centers across the country, certainly in blue states. So, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Vermont, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, but also, some interesting ones pop up here. Kansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia are some places where some of these, bans are being proposed, and potentially on the way to being passed. And so some really interesting responses coming to the infrastructure necessary to continue to build out AI's eventual takeover of the economy. And they're talking about environmental issues. They're talking about, disruption to the community, et cetera, et cetera. So I think watching this is going to be very, very, very interesting. And also it's going to be interesting to see, like, which states are open for business. For example, Virginia and Texas are currently leading the country in data center construction with 579 and 411 server farms, respectively. Virginia is a really interesting one.
Yeah, Virginia has a large percentage of data centers already, and they're also building a bunch. I mean, I think the AI companies, just talked about OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Microsoft, they need to get much better out in front of this. They should just say, we are going to subsidize consumer electricity costs on a one-for-one basis or something, so there's no effect on that. The water thing is not a real concern. I think that's not. I mean, they recycle the water. I don't see how that really matters. But they're not really. They're kind of not that loud support, like telling their side of the story. And there's a lot of people that just don't. I don't want it in my backyard, and so they've gotten blocked out of several states, and it's not good for anyone, including the people that live in those states. And then I'll just say Tennessee is some cities in East Tennessee. It's not a statewide thing.
No, of course not.
But yes, there's there are some cities that are in Tennessee that are banning it.
Yeah, and yeah, to be clear, that would never be a statewide thing here.
Yes, that's, I was going to say, like, we're going to get a bunch of people calling us, including people in the government. I don't think our, state government would be interested. I think they're actually trying to build a lot. But there's significant public concern about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Colossus is here. So, obviously Tennessee's open for business too. Okay, now, I think by all measure, the story of the week. Anthropic is set to preview the powerful Mythos model to ward off AI cyber threats. This is the Wall Street Journal, but I mean, pick your news outlet, pick your X account. Everybody has been talking about Claude Mythos, a very, very alarming and exciting breakthrough in frontier models. I would say exciting in that it's showing that we nowhere close to reaching the limits of improvement in these models. And it's actually happening a little bit faster than we thought. So that's the exciting part. The alarming part is that on one hand, this model beat every measure for safety that they previously had from a testing perspective. But clearly, those tests are going to have to be revised because it also broke out of its intended container and started doing all manner of things that they did not anticipate or expect. It also has found a huge number of zero-day vulnerabilities in pieces of software that have been long-running infrastructure across the entire internet for decades. Such as FreeBSD.
BSD is the one that shocked me. I mean, that's a security platform or piece of software that has been around, 30 years, a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so
people thought it was very security hardened because it's a security tool.
Yeah. So the implications for this are just completely mind blowing, right? I mean, on one hand, you've got the people who understand the implications of this saying, this is kind of, in effect, your quantum, your Q day accelerated into 2026, right? Because while the cryptography is not cracked, there's security holes everywhere that we don't even know.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And
so you don't
the
need
Linux kernel, it showed this like 5-part transition where you can go from just a regular user in a Linux application, which by the way is probably 90% of web servers, something like that.
Yes.
And with 5 steps that it outlined, you can go from a regular user to full admin rights over the entire server. And there's financial systems, there's healthcare systems, there's government systems, there's airports, and everything is exposed. And so Anthropic is the first one out of the gate. This system was trained with the Blackwell chips, and it's the first one they haven't actually released it, but they've talked to, we'll talk about it in a minute, have talked to other people because it's so powerful. I asked Gemini just an hour before this show, who else is using Blackwell chips and models that will be coming out before Labor Day? And OpenAI, Meta, Microsoft, Google, Moonshot, which is a Chinese firm, and XAI. They all have a significant number of Blackwell chips. I think Elon XAI has the most. And so they're all doing different, they have different recipes for how they put this together, but they're all going to be a step change 10, 15 at times better than the previous model. And one of them is in China. And so we're going to have to figure out how to manage this and turn it in a positive direction. But one bad actor would be really damaging.
Yeah, and this thing is going to be in the hands of everybody.
Yeah, so maybe Anthropic won't ever release it. I don't think that's possible given the amount of money they put in. But they're being good actors. It's sort of their brand to do this, that has worked well for them. That list, all those groups are some of them are going to publish the model immediately without concern because it's highly competitive. And
yes.
and it has a lot more
Yes.
capabilities. So just the way the game theory plays out, I think by Labor Day, there's going to be 6, 7 Mythos models with different capabilities, but they're all going to be very capable of finding vulnerabilities.
100%. And so, Project Glasswing is now this, yeah. And I don't even, this one, I don't really know what to think of, because to me, I think the most important thing about Project Glasswing is that it puts Anthropic pretty clearly at the helm of the future of AI, that they are the lab leading Apple and Google and all these other organizations, right? That it's their project.
I mean, think about the power that Ario has or Anthropic has. Their model can break into any bank, any flight system, and anyone they want to break into, they could break into. And instead of doing that, they're pulling in their competitors, basically, and saying, we need to prepare for this summer quickly. And I think
quickly.
Using that power in that way, yes, it puts them at the head of the table, but at least so far, they're behaving pretty well as the leader.
I've found people are skeptical, right? And so they say all manner of things. I've found from day one that Anthropic has been a good actor, and I've been a Claude fan for a long time. And I think that they are a very conscientious company when it comes to consistently trying to communicate the seriousness of developing superintelligence, and that this is not just automation, and this is not just some tool. Like, intelligence is something entirely different, and we don't control it, and we have to really watch it closely. And every time we build it, like, try to contain it the best that we can. And we're going to need this. I mean, look, I saw on X, Elizabeth Holmes, right, said, the cloud is dead. You need to take all your photos off the cloud. You need to, and then I saw another post from Andre Karpathy, who is one of the most important thought leaders in AI, talking about all the things that individuals need to do. You need to start using YubiKeys, definitely have passkeys, definitely have your 1Password, where, you're not using 1Password across all of your different things. But at the same time, like, you probably need a physical security key, and you probably, and on and on and on. And it's like, I really think that's right, Vic. I mean, I really think that if you have something on the cloud, you have to assume it can get hacked now. It's sucks. It's like it's not great. Like we don't need more clerical work for the sake of it. But I guess we had a good run. I guess we had a good run, and it's time to go back to local storage.
Yeah, I agree that that's the way to protect yourself, but I don't think that most people are going to be able to do that.
No.
Or want the inconvenience of that. So
no,
I think, but right now there are maybe 50 people at Anthropic that can break into any site they want to break into, and we are lucky that they're the first one, and they have a culture that's not who they hired. But I don't trust the Chinese government or the Chinese companies to do that, and I'm not even sure all the U.S. companies would have been this friendly in telling everyone. I think there'd be a range of that, but yes, it is going to be significant security concerns, and that's just the world we're going to be living in.
Yeah, and with all due respect to Anthropic, this is a week after their Claude code harness got hacked, right?
Yes,
so,
right.
And not even hacked, just released. So it's
right.
Like the idea that a Mythos level model is going to stay only at Anthropic over the next quarter is like nil.
Yes, that's right. And a lot of people that listen to us maybe don't play with this as much as you and I do, but there's kind of a subtle thing. But when Opus 6, it was 4.6 came out, it enabled this entire agentic agent thing because it was much better. Before that model, you had to you had to be really prescriptive in your prompting and context engineering to get a system to do positive work. It could be done, but it was a lot of effort. And then post that model, it's just got a lot easier and more productive. And I think those kind of step changes, if you're just looking at it from the outside, it's really difficult to tell what's the big deal. I mean, yes, it's whatever, 10 billion to 1 trillion. It's a bigger number, but what that means, unless you're really working with it every day, I think it's hard to understand. So my recommendation is for people to just like try, get a $20 plan, get a $100 plan per month, and just put some time in learning this stuff, because it's going to keep getting. We're going to have Blackwell models in the next 6 months, and Blackwell is not the cutting edge. Rubin is another step change better, but it takes a year and a half ish to get them all, to get out of NVIDIA and then into labs and production. So probably a year from now, you're going to have another step change. And so it just, the train's not slowing down. If anything, it's accelerating.
Yes, indeed, my friend. What a timeline we are on. What a timeline we are on.
Someone please take Mythos and turn it to help nurses.
He's exactly. Thanks for putting together another great show. Next week, I will be in CDMX, so another remote week for us. I'm looking forward to seeing what the week brings us.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on. We'll report it. Whatever comes up, we'll report it.
Always. All right, buddy. Talk soon.